Oh, I guess we're ready. I guess we're ready to go. Okay. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, one time known as the San Francisco Museum of Art, and one time known as the San Francisco Art Association Gallery, but that's 150 years ago or so. So anyway, here we are in the show, and you see the title behind us, People Make This Place, which is a quote from Dewey Crumpler's commencement speech that he gave at the last true commencement for the school, where he talked about people make this place, this small place in Northern California has echoed waves of creativity. And it's such a perfect line about for this exhibition, as well as for the Art Institute, as he always had everything figured out. So thank you very much, Dewey, for figuring out the title for this exhibition that they're doing at the museum. Today, we're going to wander through the different gallery spaces that were put together by the excellent curators here at the museum, including Shana Lopes, who's here with us, and David Sr., who is their librarian extraordinaire, who has always helped us out with many projects. Becky Alexander, of course, myself, and two curators who are also very integral to doing this show were Maria Castro, who is now in Philadelphia, and Tanya Zimbardo. So they all have their fingerprints all over this exhibition, all the wonderful things that are being shown. And it's sort of like it's not the tip of the iceberg, but it's a chunk of the iceberg that exists in the history of the San Francisco Art Institute. But we're going to start in this first space where there's plenty of archival information along with this set of photographs, a yearbook wall that they call it, not a timeline, but a yearbook wall.
Yeah, and we should just say we were so excited to be invited to participate in this way. So a lot of stuff in this first gallery is stuff from the archives, enlargements of photos, which we picked out, which was an impossible task out of so many photos. We were trying to represent the school with a smaller number and some objects. And there's more ephemera in the different galleries that's from the archive. So the exhibition itself is curated from the museum's collection, their permanent collection. They had, I think you guys said like 3,000 works of art that were from artists who were associated with the school to pick from. So also an impossible task, but that is what is in these galleries. And they're supported by material from the archives that we were so excited to be able to contribute.
I think what we're going to show first are some of these objects. And the very first one are these beautiful snow globes,
okay,
which we should show as long as we're standing right here.
Let's get close.
Yeah. You have to get close to these, though.
And it looks like there's some reflection, so it's a little hard to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are amazing snow globes by J.D. Beltran. Started as a project when she was an MFA student at the school, and I'm sure you guys will all recognize these spots on campus. The snow globes are full of both people and places from the campus. So you can see the courtyard, you can see the gallery, and the cafe, and the bathrooms. And then the snow globes are full of the actual photograph faces of people that JD studied with or who were notable people from the school. So those are, you really have to see it in person just to see those little faces on there. And then each snow globe has a tiny snow globe inside of it that the figures in the snow globes are looking at.
Should say how JD was.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. When we were deciding to include these, JD came to the conservation studio and restored a lot of the figures, so repainted some of the areas, and that was an exciting collaboration. And I think the conservation team here was really excited to have her come and do that work in a quick way to then get installed in the gallery.
And so this space is really great because it does give people a sense of what the Art Institute looked like, a little bit of the architecture of the whole place. Even if JD's is very much Gulliver's Travels.
And with the design of this gallery, and one of the things that was important for the layout was to have this as a feature image, where this is how you're walking into this space. So the courtyard with the fountain.
Give the overview from a little further back. So this is what you first see as you walk into the exhibition. You're kind of welcomed by the arch looking into the courtyard and seeing the front door there. And so all of these vitrines have objects from the archives. We've got the Birkenstocks that were quote unquote bronze for Fred Martin. Many of you probably remember him wearing Birkenstocks all the time. And when he retired as dean, these were spray paint bronzed in his honor. So that, and then let's see, up here we have Richard Berger's vest, probably also really familiar to many of you. It's really nice. Another amazing part of working with a museum is getting to work with their conservators, and they did a really nice job of just lightly patching up a few holes in the vest so it could hang really nicely here. It's just such a nice, well-worn piece of the school's history that feels really personal and nice. Should we move on to the photo wall? Here, let me put it back on the card.
So we have this selection of photographs from the archives, and it has this wonderful range because it has everything from like Carlos Villa and Pete in the cafe, the artist soapbox derby that was sponsored by the museum, and the last entry from the Art Institute students on the right there. And in the middle is the artist soapbox derby that shows Richard Shaw and Martha Shaw with their pencil soapbox derby. Tony Labat is up there in a performance in Studio 10, scrubbing the floor. There's a set of students up on the roof outside of the photo department, and they're hanging out. And Mike Henderson thought it might be Dick Miller's humanities class, where they're all having wine and smoking cigarettes and whatever else. A nice photograph of the exhibition that was done in 1969 called USA in Your Heart, about photography, and shows Imogen Cunningham with Ruth Asawa, with Imogen Cunningham's photographs on the miniskirt dress that Ruth Asawa somehow cobbled together as a ceramic piece. But a wonderful assortment of things. And as David mentioned with the J.D. Beltran piece, or Becky did, some of these things really need to be seen live. So whenever you guys are in San Francisco or close by, do definitely stop by to see the show, because it really is fun to see all this stuff that resembles your alma mater and whoever else is here. And up above, you can see the two signs that were retrieved from some sort of rummage sale,
an antique store
maybe 30 years ago. But they are two signs that date from 1916 that represent the school when it was located on top of Nob Hill.
And our goal with the wall was to include a little of everything. Obviously, that also leaves out so much, but we hope that any alum who comes by will at least see someone or something that they remember and feel like it represents their experience at the school.
And, for instance, here you see a photograph by Jessica Tanzer that shows a commencement where students and others and spectators would show up on the roof to look down on things. And you see Ivy Womack, who was a cafe worker when they were protesting budget cuts at the school, in the cafe. Linda Connor looking at some student work, and below Linda is Perkle Jones and Zig Jackson. I think Perkle's last TA was Zig Rising Buffalo. And then below that is Kathy Acker, who taught at two different times at the Art Institute, once in the early 80s, and then once later in the late 80s and early 90s, where I think her classes met at either Vesuvio's or some other bar in the city.
maybe one last object before we leave this room. Down here we have the ashes of Jerry Bouchard, which were baked into ceramics by Richard Shaw after his death, and then wrapped in little Hawaiian shirt type fabric that was sort of reminiscent of the shirts that he would wear. And we've been informed that this is the first time the museum has human remains on display or ashes on display. So that's a good first for the museum. And we're so happy to have this in the collection. Thanks to Jeff. All right, we're going to move on into the main galleries. Here we can give maybe a little bit of a view of the galleries.
Yeah, here you have things from the 1940s through the 1960s. And it includes, you're looking here at a painting by Leo Valador that was a piece from the 1960s. On the right here is Deborah Remington, who was one of the founders of the Six Gallery and a student at the Art Institute.
Maybe it would be helpful just to give a little context, I think, to this gallery. If we want to start here. So my name is Shana Lopes. I'm a photo curator here at SFMOMA. And I think it's helpful to understand why we started in the 1940s versus 1871 when the school was founded. We decided to start then because the GI Bill had passed. And so anybody who had served in the war all of a sudden could have free tuition to wherever they wanted to attend a university. And so this brought about this huge influx of students to San Francisco, but also the population of San Francisco increased by 100,000 people from 1940 to 1950. So the city was changing. We start the show with this photograph of Dorothea Lange that says, "After the war, what?" And so that starts us off. Oh, and I also just wanted to note the color red that you saw for People Make This Place, that's the actual color of the door of the Art Institute. We took paint swatches to the door to make sure that it matched, but that red is a thread that follows throughout. In addition, SFAI Stories, this font right here, is George Kuchar font or Kuchar font that was created after his death by a group of students, right? And we can talk about that too, but I just want to say that we were trying to be very intentional. And I know that we were not able to include everybody in this exhibition, but we could have filled the entire museum with SFAI alum and faculty and others who had walked through its doors. But this gallery is all about these artists in the 40s through the 60s who created art spaces to show their own work, because as Deborah Remington said, nobody would show us. And so we had to create a place of our own. And so they created galleries and art spaces like Six Gallery, Batman Gallery, King Ubu Gallery, like Jeff Gunderson mentioned before. And I'll let David Sr. talk a little bit about the gallery scene in San Francisco.
Oh, sure. But yeah, I think in this gallery too, and in some of the structure of the galleries going forward, we had this call and response like idea of showing faculty that were influential to that generation of artists. So we have a work by Clay Spahn and Dora Bothwell. And the Dora Bothwell in particular was an exciting painting to show. It was new to the collection. And within each, it's very small on the label, but within each label we have this element where it shows when either the student went to the school or when they taught at the school. So that's sort of some wayfinding for visitors. That's sort of an added bit. But then you have these two, Clay and Dor, and then the rest of the gallery sort of represents sort of students from that generation, as well as these bits of ephemera and other documentation too from our photo collection. But in each gallery, we have these vitrines that show archival material from SFAI archive. And then
SFMOMA archive.
yeah, and then some from the library at SFMOMA. But Jeff, do you want to mention some of the bits that start the vitrine?
Yeah, well, on this side, you see the period when Mark Rothko was teaching at the school in the summer of 47 and 49, and when they had their Western Roundtable of Modern Art in the spring of 49. And you also see the cover of one of Rothko's roll books that he had. And up in the left-hand corner there, you see a little sketch that he did, which certainly resembles Slow Swirl at the Edge of the Sea. So, and I think we have an image of Slow Swirl we can show you that you can match up to it to see if I'm not completely crazy or blind.
Yeah, that will just take me one sec to get that up, but you can keep talking.
And we have these wonderful photographs that people in the photo department, primarily Bill Hike, had taken of the different studio scenes and what was happening at the place, where there was, parties like the Unknown, the Museum of Little Known and Unknown Objects that they did in 1949.
Here is Slow Swirl.
And this was a painting that Rothko had done in 1943 or 44 before he changes to that signature style of his, which happens while he's teaching at the Art Institute in 47 and then in 49. But he was always very much attached to this painting, Slow Swirl, and sure enough, there it is sketched onto this roll book, a little variant of it that he probably was showing to one of his students. But also in this vitrine is this wonderful stuff dealing with these artist-run spaces.
Yeah, let's see. I think we're getting there. So yeah, we picked out particularly King Ubu Gallery, which was founded in the early 50s by Robert Duncan and Jess Collins and Harry Jacobus. And then in that sort of subsequent period in the same space at 3119 Fillmore was the Sixth Gallery, which was founded by 6 artists from the Art Institute, including we have flyers here of a show by Manuel Neri, Leo Valador, Deborah Remington, Sonia Getchtoff, and Hayward King. And Joan Beatty here, which was the former name of Joan Brown. And mixed in here as well are pages from sort of the newsletters that were being printed at SFAI. I think it was called The Tower at this point.
Yeah, it was the student newspaper at the time. And so they had this wonderful sense of graphic design and beatnik aesthetic, as well as it gives you a really good sense of San Francisco cultural history with advertisements that they must have sold to the old spaghetti factory and Vesuvio's Cafe and other places, the beer keg, which is right where they hung around.
Yeah, I was drawn to these advertisements for places. And then this one that won't reproduce that well in the Zoom is a short essay by Wally Hedrick that's titled "Why Go to Art School?" ? And up here we have some more sort of documentation from that time. Jay DeFeo and the Rose, Bernice Bing poster from the Batman Gallery, and a few things that came in recently from the photo collection. I think it's, was that at the Batman Gallery? James Oliver Mitchell image of Joan Brown at a Batman Gallery show. Sorry if there's glare. And there's photo blow-ups in all of the galleries that sort of presented sort of like a singular image that we tried to sum up the feel of the place. And this is Jay DeFeo and Hayward King posing for an image in the student newsletter, I think, where they were soliciting props for still life classes.
photograph was also taken by James Oliver Mitchell.
Yeah.
And great. So I think we'll wrap up this gallery. So, oh yeah, we should show this Joan Brown bird is pretty special. We have David Park, Elmer Bischoff. This is like going through on roller skates. That looks pretty good. And then this is a really beautiful Jess collage, a mouse tail, the mouse's tail. There you go.
And if folks have questions, feel free to throw them out as we go along. Yeah, because we're moving on to the next gallery, but if there's something you're curious about from this gallery, let us know.
But we're staying kind of in the same time frame, but Jeff and Shana will talk about this gallery, which is devoted to the founding of the photo department.
Just, yeah, just scan the room for a second. So, again, the subtitle of this show is called SFAI Stories, and that's because there were a lot of different stories we could have told and we could tell, and in this gallery, the story that David kindly mentioned is the founding of the photography department, which happened in 1946, and through the means of Ansel Adams. He helped found this department, and it was different than any other department, photo department in the US at the time. And why that is because he wanted it to focus on both teaching the technical craft of photography, in addition to teaching photography as a fine art, that a photograph could be considered art and could express emotion. And that was really an exciting way to think about photography when many programs at that moment were focused on commercial photography. And so that first cohort of students, first two to three cohorts of students is represented in this space. But what I like to, when I do a tour of this gallery, I like to talk about one of the questions that's in the application that was sent to various students. Number 9 still tracks today. It says, are you willing to accept a low wage standard for most of your life in order to follow photography as a means of expressing yourself? In other words, do you wish most of all to use the camera as an art medium? So like that idea, I think, is super relevant, right? That like, if you're going to choose photography as your medium, or just if you want to be a photographer, you're probably not going to make a ton of money. And so Ansel Adams wanted to make sure that these students knew what they were getting into. Any thoughts before we?
Well, it's wonderful to see all these things, and you see the early roll books that Ansel and Minor White had for their classes. And it's exactly right. Ansel was very concerned about technical things, but this was a group of students who were very well advanced in doing technique things. And so they were right there with their instructors lots of times. And they were, they had, as you see here, you see their field trip to visit Edward Weston down in Carmel Highlands at Point Lobos. And you see that summer section where Rothko and Weston were the two guest teachers. And Weston would wander around with the students, and he wouldn't let them take their cameras with them because he thought they should see before they started to take photographs of things. And the museum has done this wonderful job of this blow up, and everybody likes to wander over here and see this picture of the students down in that little alley, which comes up to the parking lot at the school.
And so you have Benjamin Chin standing on I can't actually know what direction, on the left, and then Muriel Green, I believe, is that Muriel Green?
I think that's that might be Helen Howell.
Okay.
I think everybody is identified in here though, but you see them with their 4x5. You see them with their 4x5 cameras, and they are life size too. So.
So now, just to give you the lay of the land of this gallery, I've organized it in themes. This wall represents the students who were in that cohort. So we have David Johnson, Charles Wong, and then this group is something that I like to talk about, this grid. These are exchange prints. And so these students weren't just making photographs, they were also making friends and colleagues. So once a month, Ansel Adams at his house in Seacliff, he would host all the students and any visiting artists at his place. And the students would come with their photographs. And if you liked that picture, you could write your name on the back of it. And the next week or whenever, you would get your own copy, your own exchange print. And so this is a grid that represents Benjamin Chin's group of exchange prints. We actually have maybe 50 or so in the museum's collection. So this is just a smattering. But 12 artists are represented here. But I like to think about the camaraderie between these groups of students. This wall over here are people who are the faculty, some of the faculty at that time. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention is that on every label, we have when somebody taught at the school or when somebody attended the school, like had a BFA or got their MFA. And that is thanks to Becky and Jeff's help to figure that out. We had this grand idea that we would do it throughout the museum or even throughout the second floor, but that was a lot of work and I'm sorry. Anyways, so we have people on this faculty wall like Ansel Adams, Edward Weston, Imogen Cunningham, who lived on Green Street. She had 3 boys and it was always she wasn't that great with money, I guess I would say. And so she would have some of the students come and help her in her garden and she would give them photographs in return. She was just she was a lovely, lovely professor. Lizette Modell, who I didn't know actually taught at the Art Institute. She taught there in 49 and 73. And then you have somebody like Dorothea Lange and then Minor White. Jeff, I'm wondering if you can speak a bit on Minor White, since I feel like you know quite a bit about him.
Well, Minor was there almost from the very beginning of the program, and Ansel had contacted Beaumont Newhall, the historian of the early historian of photography, and Beaumont was involved with the program some too. But Beaumont and Nancy Newhall were the ones who recommended Minor to come and assist Ansel in the very first years. And Ansel gets a Guggenheim to go photograph in the national park soon afterwards, and he's still very much connected to the school, but it's Minor who really takes all the students under his wing and makes sure that they are paying attention to all those different aspects of photography. And Ansel and Minor both had sense enough to have a broad vision within those instructors, including people like Lizette Modell, who gave the students license to take street photography and small format photography. And people like Dorothea Lange, who were doing more documentary kinds of things, as well as making sure they went down to visit Edward Weston. And you see a nice photograph here of Beaumont and Nancy Newhall that was done by Purple Jones. That's in Ansel's garden.
And so what we also have in the ephemera case is the list of books that Nancy and Beaumont Newhall sent to Ansel Adams describing the history of photography, all the books that in order to start a photography program, what books they needed to have.
Very important to the Art Institute's library, which has a wonderful collection of photo books.
And Minor White, for those of you who may or may not know, would go on to be the first editor of Aperture magazine. But he taught at the Art Institute for 7 years. Is that right? Yeah. And really was focused on expression and expressing emotion. Okay, and that's all for that gallery. Any questions that we need to answer?
Yes.
No? Okay. If not, let's go.
There is a comment by Valentina Cassell. We remember the staff at the photo department fondly. Very kind folks, assisted with developing, renting equipment, etc.
Gonna come back to this gallery and start over at the far gallery.
Who wants to start this gallery?
Um,
The gallery done by Maria Castro.
Yeah. I guess in this regard, it's important to shout out our colleagues who aren't here. We could I think when we were thinking about this gallery already, the Carlos Villa cape here was already up in the galleries. And we wanted to make sure that this was also, it was in another gallery in the museum, but we thought about, this is a gallery that features art from the 1960s and 70s, and we were thinking about how to structure this gallery in particular in regards to this work, but also curatorial work that Carlos Villa did at the school, particularly the exhibition Other Sources that he did at the school in 1976. And the title for this gallery is an excerpt from that text that Villa wrote, and the title is Tell Our Tales. So Maria and Jessica Owens, who is a curatorial assistant in photography, focused on this generation of artists that were thinking about art that was being created sort of in a non-Western perspective from artists from all over the world. I think we were affected by an anecdote by Villa in art school when he was at the California School of Fine Arts, where a professor sort of questioned whether there was like a Filipino art history that Villa could sort of quote from. And I think a lot of the work, especially curatorially and other sources, was sort of an ongoing response to that interaction that he had with that professor. So we could get a little closer. So the vitrine here features the catalog from Other Sources. This is the front and back of that catalog, a spread, and then the flyer from Other Sources and some performance photography. I've come to see it as sort of counter programming to all of the different sort of bicentennial events that were going on around the country, and sort of a celebration of diversity rather than sort of the narratives around the founding fathers. So that is provides some structure to the rest of the gallery, where artists in this gallery, Mike Henderson, Mary Lovelace O'Neill, Carlos Villa, and Violet Davis on the other end. Violet Fields, I'm sorry.
3 months ago.
Yeah, these were all artists that were in the Other Sources show.
We can talk about, would you like to talk about that group of pictures, Jeff, or would you like to?
Sure, yeah. You know, these photographs here, the 60s and 70s are rich and very, very much a part of this exhibition, whether it's the Other Sources that show that Carlos did in 1976, which did get a bicentennial grant to do, but boy, it was it was sort of very different from most of the other things that were done. But as you can see up there, they're photographs by Purple Jones and Ruth Marion Baruch of the Panthers in 1968, which were done in conjunction with the Black Panther newspaper, and their photographs were used in the Black Panther newspaper. The classic photograph, which is in the collection here, is a poster of Huey Newton, but that is this, sort of very much a legendary piece of iconography from the Panther movement, showing Huey Newton. But we realized later that the photograph was snapped by Blair Stagg, who was one of the first students in the program and then was director of the photography department in the 1960s. But it was really put together by Bobby Seale and Huey himself, of course. And on the left there, you can see a poster from the collection of SFMOMAs of Angela Davis. And in the vitrine, you can see two of the student newspapers, one about the Third World tuition waiver, and one of the two interviews with Angela Davis when she taught there from the late 70s into the early 1990s. Two very political masks made by the students in the late 1960s, early 70s of Richard Nixon and Governor Ronald Reagan when they were doing protests against the Vietnam War and the way that Reagan was cracking down on students at University of California, Berkeley. So the 70s not only had this political vein to them, but also this all the environmental art that was done at that time, along with all the punk aesthetics too. So we'll move into that room here in a second too.
You can just say that.
Oh, there's a very nice picture of Mary O'Neill that was blown up with students. So you get a real sense of that camaraderie and the educational thinking of teaching artists at the Art Institute. I mean, here's a photographer who's sitting there with her camera, and yet here's a painting instructor talking to students in the painting studios. And of course, there's coffee. I don't see any cigarettes, but I'm surprised. Their ashtray must have been off to the side.
Any questions about this space?
Let's show the painting by Mike Henderson really quick. It reproduces well in a Zoom format, and you can get into it.
Yeah, what's interesting about this painting is that Mike has it dated as 1966 when he was a young student at the time, and I just saw the title of it, and it's Singers, and there was advice that he got from Joan Brown and from Jay DeFeo, who were two of his teachers, and I think Joan said to him, "Just paint, Mike, just paint," and you can tell here it's just this energetic, big painting that he does as a student, and you can think, and you realize, God, he was painting. He was doing the kind of things that were just coming out of his psyche and his soul. So it was very cool to see this painting in here, which I'd never seen before.
Exhibition at Haynes Gallery?
Sure, Haynes Gallery, yeah.
All right, we'll go to the next one.
Let's see. So the story in this gallery, there's actually a couple of stories in this gallery that takes on the 80s and 90s. We have music and punk. We have the founding of the performance and video and new genres department later, and photography, and let's see, HIVs, Virgin Sun in the 80s in San Francisco. What other themes are throughout here?
Yeah, the sort of generational sort of balance between faculty and students, I think.
And this gallery was organized by Tanya Zimbardo. So she was very excited about this place.
There's an SFAI graduate, Rico Solanas, walking
Maybe we could talk about punk music in this wall case.
Sure. So this is still you'll notice a theme there where we have these vitrines along each wall in a gallery, and we thought of them as like these archive walls. And each had a different vignette about how SFAI sort of permeated the city of San Francisco. And in the former one, we had the galleries related to Six Gallery and Ubu Gallery, sort of the youth culture that was creating new artistic spaces. And in this vitrine and wall, we sort of delved into how students from SFAI were sort of part of sort of the nascent punk and new wave scene, sort of this balance of art and music that was emanating out of the late 70s, early 80s. There was a neat quote that we found by the photographer Stanley Green during this research, and this is a book of photography of this moment by Stanley Green that was published about a decade ago. But Stanley Green mentioned in this book the quotation, "The Art Institute was ground zero for the punk scene, and a lot of early punk bands were former art students who would mix art and music. It was the 70s. Life in San Francisco was less complicated than is now. It was the pre-electronic age. And the beginnings of punk in San Francisco came out of the gay community and out of the art schools. And in the beginning, it was not called punk, it was called art and music." So that created an opportunity to go into the archive at SFAI and pull out different examples of bands that were sort of involved students. And the Avengers, the Mutants, Pink Section, and Romeo Void were sort of the 4 bands that we picked out to feature. And some sheets from Search and Destroy are featured here with the Avengers, and then some clippings that were in the archives, as well as flyers for a performance arts series that included Winston Tong, and then also some flyers on the walls from punk shows from around the city.
And one thing that's been really fun about having this exhibition up is getting more information about stuff that we have in the archives by people who come through and see the show and recognize themselves or others and tell us more. And one example of that is this stuff that is the big blow up on the wall is a picture from this, and there's also a set of images on this monitor here that's of this punk wedding. And we always had these photos, and we were intrigued by them and thought they were great images, but we weren't totally sure what was going on. And thanks to Steve Polta, who explained that this was actually Craig Baldwin's wedding, one of the 4 people getting married at this wedding. And he recognized it right away and pointed him out. And many of you probably know Craig as the longtime underground filmmaker and the runner of ATA in the Mission. So it's great to get more information about the stuff in our collection this way.
And we'd still love to find whatever videotape there is in the videographer that's in the courtyard there.
We got a question from Lawrence Banka. He was asking if SFAI faculty staff were involved in the alternative rock movement in the 60s by creating posters and other graphics. Do you know anything about that?
Well, yeah, they certainly were. In fact, those 4 main rock poster artists, Wes Wilson, Victor Moscoso, Stanley Mouse, and Alton Kelly, were all either students or teachers at the Art Institute, and they're the very first rock poster exhibition held in November of 1966, which seems to be before they even existed, was held in the Diego Rivera Gallery. But yeah, there were plenty of those bands that were a part of the school's history. Jerry Garcia had gone there as a student in the late 1950s as a kid.
Who would like to talk about the founding of the performance and video department or new genres?
Well, we could wander over here and look at Paul Koss and Howard Freed, 2 pieces by 2 of the first faculty members in that department, Paul Koss and Howard Freed. The department came out of the sculpture department. Howard was teaching video out of the sculpture department in probably the late 60s, maybe the early 70s. And the department starts in 1979. If you see this Paul Koss piece, actually maybe see it from above. We should carry it over here. And this was a piece that Paul Koss did in collaboration with an art auction at the Art Institute, and he had put a piece. Was up at his place at Donner, and he put a piece of ice in there, an icicle off of I think the side of his house, and he packaged it up and sent it down for the art auction. You can see the little image of the remnant of the ice right before it was probably sold. And then a piece by Howard Freed that I have a hard time explaining. And he was in here the other day, and I should ask him more details. Really, it was really fun to see him here, but he's moving his studio from one spot to another. Do you know Becky? To SFAI, I think.
Davis, right? And he was trying to load everything up on his truck and bring that table over. And this is the documentation of his failure to move his studio from one place to the other. And then that becomes the art piece itself.
And both Paul Koss and Howard Freed attended SFAI as undergraduates and then would go on to teach. They both, I believe they both studied painting.
I think they did study painting, and it's really fun to ask both of them about their experiences there as students, because it's a couple of Paul's work appear in the catalog, a couple of his paintings, I think, and it just seems like a different time. But you realize that they're there at a really interesting time. And I don't think either of them were enrolled in Bruce Naumann's class who was teaching there at that time, but there certainly was an influence of these people who were, pivoting in the art world to things that they wind up doing soon afterwards. And I'm so thrilled that the SFMOMA has these two pieces in their collection.
We got a couple of comments and questions. One is from JD Beltran saying, during grad school, I first met Howard Fried outside the courtyard bathroom, and he was carrying a Fredericks of Hollywood shopping bag. That was a little detail. And then Peter McLaurin says, Howard Fried forever, easily one of my favorite instructors during my time in the mid to late aughts. And we had one other comment by Elizabeth Conke about read awesome context about Craig Baldwin. Where are the Michael Changs, I believe? Lots of shots of punk shows in the studios.
Yeah, he took photographs that were used in Search and Destroy. This is one more photograph which is on the same wall as the conceptual art, and it's a photograph by Linda Connor, who I'm not sure she understands what a conceptual art piece this is, but it is one beautiful photograph by Linda that was culled from the glass negatives at the observatory, the Lick Observatory down in the South Bay.
Yeah, and they were, she uses glass plate negatives that were found there. I believe the glass plate negatives were from the 1870s. I can't remember. Yeah, 1890s.
Yeah.
Linda is actually here. Linda, if you want to say something, go ahead.
The conceptual photographer is there?
Yes. I'm sort of one of the old-fashioned ones.
Yeah.
But Jerry Burchard, when I first came to the Art Institute and was being interviewed, I had some little glass plate things I had done in Chicago as a graduate student. Sorry, I have a cold, so I sound funny. And he told me about the Lick Observatory's wonderful archive of glass plates. And it wasn't until the 90s when I had that wonderful printing out paper that was sun exposed that came in larger sheets that I went down there and weaseled my way into the archive and would go down for a weekend with print frames and just sit outside their archive with these beautiful negatives. Yes, it was just a thrill to work with them and kind of mix them in with my earthly pictures to these more sublime ones.
Well, it's wonderful to have that photograph in this collection of things. And here, and on this wall, as you're looking at here, is a Jack Fulton photograph on the far right with his wonderful color photography. And as you say, Michael Jang, one of his photographs he did when he was working with punk bands and things that wind up in Search and Destroy. And Hank Wessel photograph, as well as a Mimi Plum photograph over there on the left, and which makes me want to show you another image if we could take it.
We have a Mimi Plum. Mimi Plum is represented in that photograph that's above the doorway. It's of the library of the Art Institute, and she's sitting at a table studying. And I think she's doing this is during her BFA. Up there.
Yeah, we had printed this up large, and she recognized herself in the photograph. But we have to show the library for us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This is a beautiful picture of the library from archives. I think I got it.
Good.
We got a couple more comments. One from Andrea Rex for Linda. Linda's The Sacred and the Profane class in the mid-90s was one of my favorites. And then Peter Max Lawrence is asking if there is an artwork included from Sharon Grace.
Is there an artwork by Sharon Grace in the show? Unfortunately, there's not. We were only given 5 galleries of space, and so we couldn't include a lot of people in the show.
But we have good things in the archives about Sharon. So anybody who's interested, please contact us. We're gonna show you a really nice image, which is we're so happy is in the collection here by Jerome, that many of you probably remember. And um, we have a great photograph that we're gonna pop in here of Jerome in his studio. And Jerome always, I mean, there's a photograph of Jerome in drag in the vitrines over there with the punk things. But when Jerome was working, it was always fun to see him in his almost blue jeans. And I mean, there he is working in a studio, and you can see how much work he's really doing at the time.
Sorry, I have to
And that's probably underneath the ramp, I think. But we have to share.
yeah, I gotta share. There you go. There
And
he is. Yeah, you can see the ramp in
Jerome.
the background.
Yeah.
And it's just such a great photo of him at work that we wanted to include that.
Since you're sharing, do you want to flip to the?
Yeah, let's flip to the other thing we wanted to
with
show you guys.
Yeah, there's one more thing we'd love to share.
There we go.
Yeah. And it is,
So we're sharing.
we're going to share. This is one piece that's in here represents a performance piece or a installation happening thing that students did, the SFAI Gay and Lesbian Group in 1989 on the very first World AIDS Day. And it was, let's talk about safe sex. And what they did is they set up beds and got in their pajamas in Union Square, and they had this poster, let's talk about safe sex with people, as something that they were doing that was of the moment and of crucial, need to be crucially understood by everybody in the world, of course, at that time. But the two people in the picture were Cliff Hanks and Mickey Goralski. And Cliff and Mickey had not seen each other until they wandered in here. We made sure they both appeared at the same time after this exhibition went up, and so we made sure we got them to reenact their photograph for their wonderful poster that they had done in 1989.
We have one more question by Joe Cameron. And Joe, I'm not sure you're going to get an answer on that one. Who is your favorite artist, Jeff and Becky, apparently?
You mean in this minute?
In this minute, I guess. Yeah, that narrows it down.
I walked by Jeff Cameron's poster. Oh, that's a good question.
Well, let's do it.
It is. You can't answer it.
Yeah, that's an unanswerable question.
So yeah, we're back at another archival, and this is the last gallery that we'll show. This is the sort of the most contemporary gallery. But we wanted to find space for sort of to recognize the work of George Kuchar in this show. There's not a lot of moving image stuff. The film department couldn't be that well represented in the show, but we are hosting a lot of screenings. If you're in San Francisco, pay attention to sort of the calendar of the museum.
Screening around the holidays, so
yeah,
keep an eye out for that.
But one of the things that we came across in the research for the show was sort of the really wonderful materials that the archive has related to George's tenure at the school, and some of the performance and screening flyers that came along with over the years that were hosted at the school, and some pictures from classes. This is a really beautiful, sort of more contemporary image from the aughts, like the 2000s, that Margaret Tedesco took of a George Kuchar class here, and kind of Margaret provided the image for that in the days leading up to the show. And I don't know if you can see the all of the videotapes from the student films and the evocative and fun titles, and that seemed really special to include in this display, as well as a lot of original posters that were in the archives for the student screenings, or even screenings of Mike as well, this Age of Anxiety. This is one original drawing that is in the library collection here at SFMOMA that was donated a few years ago. It's a drawing Mike Kuchar did for the memorial pamphlet at SFAI after George's passing. So that's a vignette. The other really amazing document in the archive is this original set of drawings called My Diary from 1970, and they're kind of like storyboards of original drawings that were part of the archive that we included, as well as some self-evaluations. I don't know how well you can read that, but if you have a chance to visit the gallery, you can read them. They're really funny, of George evaluating his teaching after a year of during the self or faculty evaluation process.
I guess to take a step back, this gallery represents the mid-90s through the early 2000s, 2010s, excuse me. So San Francisco was changing dramatically. The housing market shifted everything. So gentrification was upon us, and yeah, the city was changing. And a lot of the artists that are represented in this space, they use strategies of humor, appropriation. They point to other mediums in their work. There's also a thread of anti-colonialist or anti-capitalist critique that's happening here. Maybe we can start with the Dewey Crumpler work that we're very excited to have on view. Maybe we can go over here so that we can see the sightline of it. So as we noticed, or as we had said in the beginning, Dewey Crumpler's final commencement speech is how we came to the title of this exhibition. He was both a student at the Art Institute, but also taught there for 32 years. Is that right? And so this is just a great sightline. This work, this is the first work that the museum acquired by him, and this is our first time showing it. We're very excited. In the 90s, mid-90s, he went to Amsterdam and he was looking at this beautiful field of tulips. But what it made him think about was how these beautiful tulips had been transformed into commodities and agents of commerce. And he likened that to the Black body, and how in history, the Black body, when people were enslaved, were also considered objects. And so it's a commodification, so anti-commodification, but perhaps you might not understand that story just by looking at it, but I think it's important to know that's what's going on here. And then you have an artist like Miguel Calderon over here, who studied with George Kuchar. Let's see, who studied with George Kuchar, graduated in '94. And I think there's a lot of threads that George Kuchar kind of imparted upon Miguel. So George Kuchar was known for his low budget, tawdry, use whatever you have around you to create a work of art. So in this project called Employee of the Month, what happens is Miguel Calderon, he got a fellowship at a museum in Mexico City. And he was there for a while. He got to know the janitorial staff and the security staff while he was there, trying to come up with a project for his commission. And at one point he asks some of the staff, so, hey, like, what's in these galleries that are closed off to people? And they, acted out like, here, it's this painting where they look like this. And they, were using some of their tools. And he was like, oh my gosh, it's like, let's go up to the roof and like act this out. And so I think you can see like the Kuchar influence here. And they're using the vacuum, the duster, the bucket, and it looks very much like the paintings that people couldn't see that were Mexican academic painting from 1840s to 1870s. And then just a couple other works that are around. We have Paul Pfeiffer. Oh wow. Oh great.
I'm gonna show it, but
oh yeah. So that's the.
Sorry to be fumbling around here. So let me get to we just wanted to show the original. It's just so fun to see them side by side.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's like always a big hit actually when I do tours. But you have, individuals like Mario Ayala, who's pointing to kind of screens, but through the medium of painting, acrylic on canvas. You have Paul Pfeiffer, whose sculpture Poltergeist, so pointing to film, but in sculpture. And then here we have Kota Zawa, a light box, which you totally can't see because it's blown out. I apologize. Of Ansel Adams, so the founder of the photography department. And then you have Lindsay White on the other side, who was a former a past Sika winner from 2017, but also taught photography and closed out the program there. And so I wanted to flank these, have these walls be the photo teachers. Anything else that we'd like to discuss in this gallery? There's Enrique Shigoya, there's Rigo, there's Stephanie Sahuko. We could go on for hours.
The Enrique Codex is fabulous, of course, and as somebody who was, I think he was the director of the Galleria della Raza too at this point, but he does this in 1992, which is the 500th anniversary of Columbus wandering around the globe somehow. But it's a riff off of what if it had been the other way around, and the people in Central America had discovered the heathens of Europe. But a wonderful piece by Enrique Shigoya, who mixes pop culture with art history and political things, and involving a lot of collage stuff that could resemble everything from jest, but all done in his wonderful way. And there's much more to this show. There's some really nice videos that have been put together here over the years with different people from the Art Institute, whether it's Joan Brown or Kota or Imogen Cunningham or others yakking about their artwork, which is really fun to sit through and watch too. And I think we missed showing the Mike Mandel's baseball cards as it's World Series season, but his photographer's baseball cards, which shows a chunk of Art Institute faculty too.
And I should also note that when artists were living, we did send them labels to make sure that they felt like we were representing their work in an appropriate fashion. We got feedback, of course. And yeah, if there are any questions for us, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think this is a great moment to kind of stop our video.